Yeah, hi, I'm Claire. I work for Peabody, and we have a community. Can I take that out of the way so you can see my slides? Peabody is a housing association that has existed for 150 years or so, set up by George Peabody, a kind of quite a radical Victorian philanthropist. We have 66,000 homes across London and the southeast. And we have a community foundation with a budget of about 7 million and some very broad goals you'll see there in terms of boosting income, skills, well-being, and engaged communities. And historically, we worked thematically, young people services, older people, volunteering, and so on. But in the last 6 or 7 years, we've been working in an increasingly place-based way, focusing particularly on Thamesmead, Hackney, and Waltham Forest, with 3 more locations in development. And I think when you look at Renaisi's very good place-based change framework, I think it's fair to say we're all on different journeys in terms of our maturity towards full place-based working. And these places are very different in scale. So Thamesmead is the largest regeneration programme in London, £1 billion spend across 10 years, 22,000 new homes. So the team there are looking at new ways of employment, working with looking at enterprise, skills for local people, a kind of place-based approach to the labour market, things about the voluntary sector there, which is quite underdeveloped. So it's a huge initiative. My work is at the other end of the scale, looking at estate-based initiatives with local people, particularly in Hackney and Waltham Forest. And just to give you an example of what that looks like, some of this feels quite Birkenhead, I have to say. In Pembury, in the children's community in Hackney, we started in 2013. We came up with a manifesto for change with the community there, which is about 4,000 people. We have a 10-year programme and 8 goals that everybody wants to achieve together, everyone being the local council, schools, private sector, voluntary sector, and ourselves. And goals are things like routes out of poverty for local people, great starts at school for children, young people achieving their ambition, and underlying it, we're wanting to develop a model of neighbourhood change. As Graham said, in different locations, the manifesto that comes from the community is often quite similar, but the how has been very location specific. And in all of this, we're really working outwards from housing as an anchor institution, often quite slow to the multi-agency table, but I think can play a really radical role, not just in how we do our day job differently in terms of the housing, like our arrears work and how we might work on antisocial behaviour, how we might use our assets to leverage social change. We've got 80 community centres across London, giving those to the community to run them. But really, and we also have access to unrestricted funding. Those of us in the voluntary sector might be everybody here. If you have a 10-year vision and you have unrestricted funding, it seems like you've got the golden egg there. They're just brilliant, luxurious things to have. So we're passionate about kind of catalysing change from the perspective of housing, working with everybody in the local space. So that's kind of about me and where we come to as an organisation. If I can try and, I've got lots of things popping up on my screen. That means I can't move to the next slide. There we go. Just a few comments about building teams. One, Graham's talked about already, about the importance of employing local people with lived experience of the challenges that you're trying to address. For us, that meant employing Peabody residents. That's quite countercultural in housing, to have residents sitting in the housing office with colleagues who are looking at evictions and arrears and antisocial behaviour. And I think right at the beginning, 6-7 years ago, that was, it made people feel a bit uncertain. And it was breaking down the kind of division between professionals and local people right from the beginning. So that was, I think, quite powerful. In terms of team culture, we've just talked about that tight, loose, tight concept, and that ensuring that there is absolute clarity about the vision and goals, and then stepping back from them. And those of us working for large national organisations or big beasts of bureaucracy behind us, one of your jobs is to kind of keep the beast back and take the best of your kind of host organisation, but create the space for the vision to come really locally, and have that kind of a flat structure with your local teams. And we're talking about teams here that I've been working with about up to 10 people. But I think the thing about having that very tight structure and then allowing the how to be more emergent is, I think it's been said in the last meeting of this group, that's very bewildering, scary at times. And how do you support people to make mistakes as they go along? And particularly when you've had unrestricted funding and you're used to a culture of these are clear targets, these are your KPIs, and off you go to do them. This is a really different kind of way of working. And in the early days, we used to start seeing meetings asking people to talk about what had gone well, but we quickly learned it's much more important to talk about and be courageous with each other about what hadn't gone well, what has been an absolute disaster, and what we needed to learn from. Quick other thing for me here about thinking, you need to be creating as much space in your teams for thinking as doing. I mean, I think this systems change work is really brilliant and really terrible simultaneously. It's so complex. It's so hard to know where to intervene in a complex system. And you employ people who are really mission driven and see the changes that they want to make. And if they're part of the community, they really feel it in their bones. So we have this sort of mantra about it's not the Peabody show, because you want to jump in and we want to make the difference. But actually in place-based work, the challenge for the team is identifying with the community about what needs to happen, and then really thinking with the partnership and with residents about what it is that needs to be done, and stepping back. And that sometimes is doing the countercultural thing that disturbs the system, or bringing partners into unusual relationships with each other. So for example, for us in housing, the local school were very clear they're thinking about families, but they weren't thinking about estates, they weren't thinking about homes. And bringing the school onto the estate to meet the parents who never turned up to the parents' evenings, for example, or finding ways in which you connect nurseries and children's centres and housing and local schools in new constellations to get children ready for school. But to do that kind of intricate work, you have to have that space to step back. And we in the early days, I think, got really frenetically busy. And we needed to, simple things in away days like stop, start and continue became really important to us. We were all clear what we wanted to start doing and what we wanted to continue, but we were quite reluctant to stop things. And that was what was leading to sort of burnout in the early years. So there was a lot of like, we've got to let go of some of those things that we were passionate about because perhaps they were less effective than we'd hoped they might be, or because there's actually a burning platform that's now emerging in local place. And finally, on that, it comes from that sort of burnout as well, is the importance of peer support, bringing leaders and community members from different locations to come up for air, because this is such immersive work to reflect on what they're learning as they go along. And then the final quick thing for me is about brave conversations. I think some of the brave conversations we've been having around is about mistakes, but I think the other very powerful one we've been having very often as a team is about the inequalities that are really at the heart of place-based work. And in order to do this work well, you need to surface the inequalities in your teams between the people who are from the place and not from the place, around race, gender, class, and they're really live in our teams, and sometimes painfully so. But I think that having those honest conversations about that puts us in a much stronger place to go out and tackle the inequalities in the place that we're working in. So there's just a kind of few reflections. I hope they're might be thought-provoking. I'm sure there's many very skilled people on this call who have had their own experiences to share, but that's a little input from me.